DDoS for hire, now exploiting Citrix ADC.
Hey, Manish, I understand you're looking into a story about DDoS booters and maybe using a new technique to amplify attacks.
That's right. So basically, we're all aware that there's these DDoS for hire services out there, right? And they've now started abusing misconfigured or like out of date, unpatched DTLS, datagram TLS servers. Basically, or they're being used to amplify DDoS attacks, right? And DTLS is UDP. It's a UDP-based version of TLS protocol. And if you recall, and I was thinking of this when we were talking about the F5 load balancers. Hopefully, those F5s get patched, fairly quickly. However, historically, we don't see that. In this case, that's exactly what's happening because there's this vulnerable Citrix NetScaler ADC devices. And they have this vulnerability where the DTLS configurations are allowing these DDoS services to abuse them to amplify DDoS attacks, right? So the DTLS configuration, typically there's a hello client verify that comes through, and then that's used for anti-spoofing. But it's being abused in this case at a rate to amplify the DDoS attacks at a rate of 35. And this is kind of several months old. Citrix has already patched this, but according to NetScout, they were able to find like 4,200 still vulnerable servers out there. So this is a situation where a vulnerability came out. It was patched, or a patch was available, but again, as we so often see, organizations not actually, pushing out the patches to their entire environment and things like that, and they're now, being abused, which is obviously the progression of these types of vulnerabilities at some point.
Sounds like this is some form of SSL over UDP, and there's some degree of servers out there on the internet that have just kind of been maybe orphaned in time to leave this on when, even though it's been patched in a lot of different appliances and whatnot, to not expose this as a vulnerability for reflection attacks, which UDP usually allows. They've just, people don't get the message.
Right.
One of the things about this that kind of makes me, think is that it almost seems like there's probably a service offering out there somewhere in the world waiting, of where as an organization for free, I could go to someplace and it will tell me all of my things that I'm exposing that are vulnerable infrastructure that's probably used for, different types of attack. Either, I know we've talked about Shodan,
Right.
There's Census as well, some of these organizations, but maybe in a more, easy to read manner, even for consumer people to say, hey, when I go from home, does my home IP show anything open and exposed that could be used to be either exploited from a vulnerability standpoint or leveraged in a DDoS attack for reflection, things like that, so that you can take care of it? Because I bet you those 4,200 people that you mentioned, or 4,200 servers out there, these people just don't know. They're not even aware that these devices are being used and exploited in that manner. So it's one of those things where, I know we as a company on occasion have reached out to some customers of ours who are being abused in this manner to let them know, hey, you might realize a little bit better network internet service if you fix this one DNS server that you left open as a, open DNS reflector.
Right.
Things like that. So, it's interesting that it's just another case. It makes you think about that kind of stuff.
Right.
Sounds like a business opportunity for somebody.
Right. To make it. And then, like I said, I think Shodan and Census, they have ways that you can do that, but maybe not in a point and click way for the, a lay person to just say, hey, what's my exposure here? you kind of need to think, oh, well, I know that I have a /22 or I have a /20 network block for my company here, and that's everything that I would be exposing. Most people wouldn't know that, so or at least a layperson would not. So anyway,
but then there's the flip side to that is that who knows who you're bringing in to do that testing. They could also be posing as someone trying to help you, but actually an attacker, right?
It's an interesting thing because, what are the statistics now about how many devices you have in your own home? Forget about a business, right? Just in your own home, 10, 20, these numbers are going to continue to grow. And, the bandwidth that you're using, you have all this bandwidth, but again, if you are exploited, you are losing some of that bandwidth to some of these exploits that are using your bandwidth. And then also, what kind of vulnerability you have. So it's true. And these issues about not patching and not, I think, these servers are business. I'm assuming these are all, have small business use, and you're not going to have these in somebody's home necessarily. So you think about this from a consumer perspective when that happens, and it's just the problem is magnified dramatically if 4,200 people didn't get the message in their business about patching.
Right. And for the the consumer, it's always difficult for them to really identify where the problem is, right? So if if they have an infected device that's eating up their bandwidth, right? It's easy. The easiest thing to say is it's my ISP that's the problem, right? Because it's much more difficult to actually identify where the problem is on your network. That might be one of your devices.
Right. Yep.
Well, luckily we only have an amplification of 35. We've definitely seen worse. So, from a DDoS perspective,
right?
I haven't heard of that one. That's come up in our own DDoS, but maybe we got to look out for that one.
Look for that, yeah. So NetScout in a single vector amplification of this, I guess they're seeing about 44.6 gigabits per second, whereas the multi-vector attacks are up to around 206 to 207 gigabits per second.
And I do think, especially with some of these booter services that appear to be using this, like you said, they'll usually do some sort of blended attack. They're not going to just use this as their one method to attack the target. They're going to use DNS reflection. They'll use NTP reflection where they can. They'll use CLDAP. They'll use, anything they can, right?
Right.
So, some of this might be lost in the noise. It might be happening. I'm sure, I know it's happening, but it might not be, it might be 10% of the attack where the 90% is these other types of reflection amplification vectors.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, John. We're just not seeing it. It's in the noise.